Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dire Lycaos, and the purpose of this video is to assess the data we currently have for the 2024 election in comparison to previous elections. We're talking about voter data, we're talking about trends, all of that good analysis. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight Harris's performance in the swing states, Trump's performance, and his margins for victory, and I'm going to kind of break down how that works. Now, this data specifically here is provided by SmartElections. I will provide a link in the description for them, so you can go and review their data and look at some of the things they provided. And so this is a comparison of drop-off votes for president to the next major down ballot race. And so what does this mean? Well, drop-off vote is the difference between the president of one party and the next race of that party. This is what I was kind of talking about when I was talking about bullet ballots with Stephen Spoonermore. He did kind of walk back his bullet ballot analysis, but I don't think his analysis was wrong. I think it was misinterpreted, and he didn't have all of the data yet. And so he worked with SmartElections to help provide this data. And now we're seeing a drop-off vote as the official term. Now, as I said, this is the difference between president and their next party. The reason this graph should be a concern for you is because it has swing state and non-swing state representation. This is for 2024. Main takeaway here is on the left, we've got swing states, the Republican Party, 5.58%. So Trump overperformed his party by at least an average of 5.5%. In comparison, the Democrats underperformed, specifically Harris underperformed by a negative 1.48%. So that means that Democrats running for House or other positions got more votes than Harris did, while party members for Trump got less votes. Trump got 5% more votes than his party in the swing states. In the non-swing states, we see a more consistent performance, overperformance, which I would argue overperformance for president is common. They are a very popular candidate. They are well known. People will specifically just vote for president and not vote for their party elsewhere. And so we see that in the non-swing states where Democrats and Republicans overperformed their next major down ballot race party member by 1.37 to 2%. That is normal. That is average. That's what we see consistently throughout past elections. This graph doesn't prove or disprove anything, but it does highlight that there was some strange correlation in the swing states for Democrats underperforming while Republicans overperformed. And what could be some causes of this? The two leading theories for why Harris lost this election was one, the Democrats didn't turn out the vote, right? 10 million voters stayed home. And the other was that Harris was not a popular candidate, was not liked, and so Democrats split their tickets and voted for Biden, or voted for Trump. Now, both of these theories are disproven by this data that shows the swing state turnout for 2024. And so, as we said, if Harris wasn't a liked candidate, why did she perform on par or better than Biden in the swing states, which won Trump the election? It's the whole point. So she performed Georgia and North Carolina. Harris had more votes than Biden in 2020. And in the other ones, she performed as good, slightly under. Arizona's a little lower. But the point being, she wasn't such a margin under Biden that she was an unpopular candidate. And the other point is people are like, oh, well, the Democrats split their tickets. They either voted third party or some of them voted for Trump this time. As I said, this data doesn't show that. It doesn't show that there was such a huge difference between Biden and Harris. The only reason Trump won all 7 swing states is because his voting totals exceeded Harris's from this year, this election, and Biden's from 2020. Biden would have ran in 2020 or ran in 2024 with his numbers. If he would have stayed the same and had the same numbers this election as last election, he would have lost. Trump would have beat him, which doesn't make any sense. And so I'm going to now do some data breakdown on a few key states to show you that my leading theory, and the leading theory of a lot of data analysts and everyone else who's talking about this election, is that there was an election hack. There was an algorithm to flip votes from Harris to Trump across the swing states, at least the swing states. We can prove and we can see that in the data. But there's an algorithm that took votes from Harris and gave it to Trump. And we see that because of the difference between the drop-off votes. Now, if we look at Arizona for 2024, this graph here specifically shows the correlation between the president and the next position, I believe, Senate and or representative. And so it shows both parties. We have Joe Biden and Mark Kelly, and we have Donald Trump and Martha McSally. And you'll see in these counties in Arizona in 2020 that they were pretty lock in step for the Democratic Party. Joe Biden, Mark Kelly, right? They go up, they go down together. Joe Biden underperformed just a little bit in some of these counties, and yet he overperformed Mark Kelly in Santa Cruz. He pretty on par in Coconino, and I believe there was another one here I wanted to highlight. So pretty consistent, not a huge change between them. Santa Cruz specifically, we see that Biden was chosen over Mark Kelly. And so what's interesting is if this is normal naturalized data, if the 2020 elections are basis, we should see some similar trends in 2024, right? Santa Cruz, some of these swing counties. And so we're going to look at Arizona in 2024. Let's look at what immediately jumps out at you. Well, what immediately jumps out is it looks like there's a bigger difference between the president and the next position. So Kamala Harris, Donald Trump. And so what's really suspicious here is if we look at Kamala Harris's performance across all these counties, you'll notice that in each and every one, she underperforms her party. She never exceeds her party, which is really strange for a president. And so even in Coconino, right, a pro-Democratic county, she underperforms Ruben Gallego. And yet, I mean, we see it in Paima, we see it in Santa Cruz, right? And what's really interesting is if we look at the Republican Party, we see the opposite. Donald Trump always overperforms his party. He never falls under. He never falls under Kari Lake. And yet, in the first graph, we saw that he would sometimes underperform in Santa Cruz, right, and be outvoted. And so that is very strange that we see such a huge disconnect, right? And so this almost looks mirrored, is the problem. This looks very anomalous. This data, in my mind, shows that if there was a vote tabulation hack to flip votes from Harris to Trump presidential votes and keeps the votes the same for the rest of the party, well, this would show that, right? This shows that Kamala Harris specifically underperformed everywhere and Donald Trump overperformed everywhere. Instead of being on par, like we saw in 2020 with Biden, she always falls under. Same thing here. If we look at Texas, main takeaways for Texas in 2020, this is chaotic. It's kind of the whole point. This is a chaotic graph. And so this is, Democrats' performance versus Republicans' performance. How much more or less did the Democrat president get votes over the next position, which is Senate here? Same with, Donald Trump. So you'll see it's very chaotic. You're seeing parts where Trump fell under the Senate. He exceeded the Senate. Biden fell under the Senate, exceeded the Senate position. We look at 2024 for Texas. It looks so different. And that's the concern, is we see that Trump always overperforms on average. There's only 3 counties, I think, where he underperformed. And I would like to look into those counties or whatever you'd call these to see maybe if they have different vote processes or if they had issues with tabulation machines and they hand counted. They're so small. Who knows? But the point being, on average, Harris underperformed everywhere. Trump overperformed everywhere consistently. There is no diversity. There's no chaos. It is systematic, algorithmic. Let's look at some more data. Let's look at North Carolina. Same thing, chaotic, up, down. We're seeing shifts left and right. That's kind of the point. These are swing states, Texas not, but some of these are swing states, and you should see, some give and take. Even if one party exceeds, you should see some blue come up. That's the whole point. Is presidents are populous, they are popular, and so they should they should exceed on average, right? And you'd think more people would vote for the president than other positions. It just makes sense. No positive change. Harris always underperformed in North Carolina. In the swing states, you see that. She always underperforms. She is always under the next candidate for her party. Now, what this data shows, that this is vote change from election to election. So this is 2008 in comparison to 2004. You'll see this is very chaotic, right? It's not as chaotic. There's some positive and negative goals. But the point being, there's overlap. Specifically, this is Obama versus McCain. Obama won in what people would describe as a landslide victory. And so we see that his vote changes were very positive. Democrats gained a lot of votes. And we'll see that the Republican Party lost a lot of votes. Yet they still had some states, right? Georgia, a few others where they gained votes as well. And so, you'll see that. That's the whole point, is there are swing states and there are Republican states and there are Democrat states. There will be some positive change for every county. And you should, that's normal. People will vote. You will gain support in some states and lose support in others. But overall, the average was to Obama here. Now, if we look at 2012, Obama's second term, you'll see that he didn't gain. He became slightly less popular, but he still overall won because he had more votes, and the difference wasn't enough. But you still have, some positive and some negative change. There's overlap. There's chaos here. Now we look at 2016 in comparison to 2012. This is where it starts to get a little more interesting. It's very chaotic, yet very close. There is equal gain and loss. Trump won over Clinton. Clinton lost a few key states, lost some votes in a few key states. And yet, we look at 2020. Trump, second term, lost to Biden. Very hand in hand. Yet Biden had, additional votes. He exceeded the margins. Swing states really won him the votes. That's the whole point. Swing states win you the elections. Now, keep this in mind. Keep this in mind. We're going to look at 2024. There you go. What jumps out at you? What is suspicious about this? You'll notice there is no overlap. It almost seems to be a systematic change where everywhere that the Republicans gained votes or lost votes, they exceeded what the Democrats lost or gained. Everywhere that the Dems went up, the Republicans went up more. Everywhere that the Dems went down, the Republicans stayed up a little more, right? Isn't that interesting? And so I personally think this is some additional damning evidence, because this continues to show that if there was a algorithmic vote manipulation in just the swing states, maybe other places, but if just the swing states, we're seeing that shift from Harris's votes to Biden, or to Trump's votes, Harris to Trump. And we're seeing her numbers be artificially pulled down. And that's why Dems won local positions, yet lost the presidency in those swing states. Now I'm going to show you a map. This is a very interesting map to me. This is the Impossible 3-color map by Tinfoil Times. You can go look at his Substack. I know it's pretty grainy. I apologize for that. But the main takeaway is there is 3 colors on this map. There are 4 colors in the margin. And so the breakdown here is pretty simple. We're going to look at county level change. So the red shows counties that stayed Trump, stayed Republican. Blue shows counties that stayed blue, Dem. And the purple shows the flips. Purple is a flip from Biden from 2020 to Trump in 2024. So blue to red, blue to red. And so all these purples show change. And so you do see a lot of counties that shifted Republican. Now, what's interesting is yellow shows the flips from Trump to Harris, Republican to Democrat. There is no yellow on this map. There were 0 flips from Democratic to Republican counties in the country. Not a single county flipped blue. This continues to question whether there was vote manipulation and an algorithm to do so to keep Harris's numbers under Trump's. That's it. She never exceeded. Now, what's interesting is if we look at this breakdown as well, this is a comparison. So 2024, right? I talked about how many counties flipped. This is a comparison in 1984. Similar results in terms of Democrats fell just under the Republicans. This is Ronald Reagan versus Mondale. And so even with Ronald Reagan winning in a larger margin in this election than in 2024, you'll notice Mondale still flipped 30 counties, right? This is a good comparison because people are like, oh, well, Trump exceeded, Trump performed so well. Similar situation, Reagan overperformed in what Trump did. Reagan was more popular, and Democrats still flipped 30 counties. Harris flipped 0 in 2024. So, if there was vote manipulation, why should we care, right? Well, as I said, the swing states look like if we were going to flip votes from Harris to Trump, occurred in the swing states. Now I'm going to show you some data. I'm going to show you pre-corrected drop-off votes. We see Dems lost, Republicans won. This margin, this 267,000, some change across the board. We removed these numbers from the Republican Party, and we gave them back to the Democratic Party. As we said, if there was a vote flipping algorithm, and the difference between the vote margins is that the numbers that got flipped, we're going to give them back to the Democrats and remove them from the Republican Party. And these are 5 of the states that we have this data for that we can do this calculation. And what you'll notice, in every one of these 5 swing states, the margin of Trump winning is less than the amount of votes that were potentially flipped. So North Carolina, Harris wins with an outstanding number of votes. Michigan, higher margin. Wisconsin, close. Nevada, close. Arizona, outstanding amount. And so what this proves, if these hundreds of thousands of votes were actually flipped, where only Trump was selected for the Republican Party, if these were created using a vote flipping algorithm, an election hack, then Harris actually won the 2024 presidential election with 284 electoral votes over Trump's 254. She would have won. Thank you.